Hello once again everyone and welcome back. I am your host Natty and this is Nat Reviews, the series where I take a look at media and give my thoughts on it. It's been quite a while, but it's finally time for me to take a look at American Idiot. It is quite strange since I originally had written up a review back in 2017. Yes, it was one of my first reviews written when I was beginning Nat Reviews, but never did get to make it a reality. However, now that it's been a few years and my perspectives have widened, as well as my knowledge, why not finally get around to reviewing perhaps Green Day's most popular piece of work? That is what I believe we shall do. So settle in and let's begin. Alright, so we shall start off with a little background before we jump into the music itself. Work on American Idiot began not long after the master recordings for the band's attempted album Cigarettes and Valentines were stolen. Instead of going back and re-recording that which they were working on, the band decided it best to just start from scratch. From here, the band began to record their magnum opus, American Idiot. Green Day were in a low point in their career. They had been one of the largest bands of the 90s, but for their album from 2000, Warning, it was a relative flop for the band. However, fresh off of a tour with Blink-182, Green Day were reinvigorated, and that helped contribute to their energy going into American Idiot. Despite that freshened height of energy, the band was also having personal struggles within. Things had gotten quite to a point between the various members, to the point there were talks of ending the band altogether. However, after some personal discussions, the band members had gotten back together and were now stronger as a group than ever. Billy had allowed the other members of the band to have more input in the decisions musically, and things were improving. The band began to ponder a change in musical direction and were more open to other musical influences with this album. It was a return to their pop-punk ways, but it also had opened the door for various other influences to come in, creating quite a new sound for the band as a whole. There is so much more to the development of the album that I could go over, but we would be here for quite a few hours. I wish to keep this video as contained as I can make it, so bear with me. But yes, we cannot discuss this album without addressing the elephant in the room. 9/11. In September of 2001, a terrorist attack shocked the nation, and in the aftermath the United States decided to declare war on multiple nations in the Middle East. Again, many things could be gone over here, but for the sake of narrative coherency and simplicity, I'm going to keep this brief. There was a large anti-war sentiment among the American populace. Various bands would speak out and protest the wars. They were seen as unnecessary and were seen as damaging things for years to come in the way of relations with the region, and that the wars would potentially turn into forever wars, as many strategists warned. The rise of the Junior Bush administration to the presidency of the United States was also causing widespread ramifications in not only American culture but also the world. Once again, there is many things that could be said here, but I wish to keep this as short as I can. If you desire to hear more about the political climate surrounding this album and the various takes on it that have been made about this album, there is many other places for that. I shall try to keep this more clear to my main points rather than give a lecture on how post 9/11 the world that it created and the climate it created changed American society, and how we're still living with the repercussions to this day, and how it changed the music landscape. Anyhow, back to the point at hand. It was in this political climate that American Idiot was created. With the background now over, I feel it's finally time to get to the part most come to a music review for, the music. So yes, I shall now begin talking of the songs that are present on the album. However, instead of my usual song-by-song rundown, as this album plays out more as a single narrative, I shall speak of individual songs for when they do not mix with the overall narrative itself. Otherwise, I shall be going over the narrative as it plays out in each quote-unquote chapter. First off, to start the album, we get the album's namesake, American Idiot. It is a song full of socio-political messages about contemporary America, one that we are still living with to this day in many ways. Like many places on the album, this song is a large burst of energy, especially for the very beginning of the album. It's a very loud song for sure, and definitely gives off the punk vibe the band was known for. It definitely fits in with the time it was made for sure. Many of the things the song is about I had went over in the background portion of this video, so I shall save repeating it. But yes, corporate America controlling our lives to insane degrees, and the murder of small businesses, 9/11 and Bush-era America, all the stuff very prevalent at the time was discussed in various degrees here in this song. The content of this song helps establish the atmosphere that the album's story takes place in, and it leads up to the introduction of the story's main character. Speaking of which, next up we begin the saga the album centers around. Jesus of Suburbia is a magnificent 9-minute composition that establishes the main character of the album's overarching story, Jesus of Suburbia. He is an anti-hero of lower middle income America. He is disillusioned and tired of his surroundings and those around him. So he eventually decides upon leaving his location to move elsewhere, and this is the beginning of the story the album discusses. He runs away from his surroundings, much like Billy Joe had done in real life, as he ran off to Manhattan during the creation of this album, which is where he got the inspiration he would develop into the album we know. Jesus tries to run away in order to find his place in the world where he can find the truth and not live in the lies he is surrounded by. He tries to find solace in drugs and denial. From here, the album takes a pause in the narrative to send us into the song Holiday, which is another song about the political situation America found itself in culturally. It is an anti-war song that is written about the Iraq War and the wars America had begun in the Middle East. A very pointed song for sure. Jesus, meanwhile, was also being radicalized by the world he saw around him. This song serving as an insight into what was radicalizing his thoughts that led to his leaving home. The song then effortlessly transitions into Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which tells of how Jesus was now walking alone after running from his home. The sheer loneliness being very impactful on him. The many thoughts bombarding his mind with every step he takes. He has nothing to do and nowhere to go, but onward he goes, trying to find his way. In the song, he is shown to be coming down from his heated emotions and excitement from leaving home and entering the city. Even in a city full of people, he still feels so empty and alone. A very emotional thing for anyone to feel. His loneliness builds and leads to the creation of Saint Jimmy from his near insanity, to create a character to give him some solace. The album then transitions into Are We the Waiting, which finds Jesus trying to meditate from the peak of his low point in Boulevard. Despite his efforts, however, he is still in his low point emotionally, losing his mind. The album thus far has painted very well the many emotional ups and downs one may feel in a time such as this. The album is very good at painting the vast spectrum that is emotions within humanity. It isn't always cut and dry and simple, it's complex. The song is interrupted by the beginning of the next song, St. Jimmy. Jesus has gone off the deep end and has now become eaten up into a new character that is St. Jimmy. Jesus' rage has led him to creating this new alter ego and, in fact, dual personality that is St. Jimmy. This song is a pivotal changing point in the album and the story arc it has been telling us thus far. After the creation of St. Jimmy, we are led to Give Me Novocaine, in which Jesus of Suburbia is wanting to take drugs to relieve stress from his life and asking for reassurance from his alter ego, St. Jimmy. One way the song can be taken is that Jesus is trying to take drugs in order to suppress his own personality to become his alter ego, which is who he prefers to be. As you can see, the album is very much going in deep to the mental state of the characters involved, creating a very emotional experience through its story. All the while, each song is different from each other, yet flowing flawlessly into each other. Each song representing different styles musically and have different paces, but all forming a singular story. It really is a great piece. Back to the story. Now that he has subdued his main personality via drugs, he is now caught up into his St. Jimmy form as he stumbles upon another new character. What's her name? She is a rebellious woman who Jimmy can't help but fall in love with, as they seem to complement each other so much. She is a strong character who was equally as strong in her personality and one whom is willing to protest and rebel for her beliefs. The album moves along to Extraordinary Girl, which in this chapter, Jimmy has fallen for What's Her Name. What's Her Name is a strong willed and has goals, while Jesus is weak and has no goals and is in a deep depression. What's Her Name is attracted to St. Jimmy, however, for he is more rebellious and strong compared to the weak Jesus. Even then, the song also reveals that What's Her Name also has a sadder side to her, which complements Jesus' personality. The personalities all clash and lead to the relationship ending between them. We move along to Letter Bomb, in which What's Her Name and Jesus have both broken up due to how they clash with each other's personalities. She believes he is too self-destructive and melodramatic, which leads in part to the breaking up of the two. Many of the lyrics imply What's Her Name is basically saying to Jesus that your problems aren't over till you're dead. Everything's falling apart around you. It's not my problem, and I'm leaving before you self-destruct on me. The album then takes another pause from the story arc for a moment, and we move into Wake Me Up When September Ends. It is a song that is not related to the story in any way this time around, but is instead a very emotional and touching song about the death of Billy Joe's father and how it continues to impact him. The song was originally meant to be put on another work by the band, but Billy was not emotionally ready yet to do so, and eventually it got put on American Idiot later in time. It was recorded during production of the album and got included. When September ends, we transition into the song Homecoming, which is the climax of the album's story arc. The song is the result of a friendly competition of each member of the band trying to outdo each other with their songs for the piece. With What's Her Name leaving Jesus, he has lost track of time. Things feel like an eternity to him, and he is conflicted by all the emotions he is feeling. St. Jimmy is led to his own peak of madness as well, where he begins to tell his followers that he can blame parents and society for their problems rather than themselves. Not long after, St. Jimmy ends up quote-unquote dying. The dual personality ends and Jesus is no longer related to St. Jimmy. He kills his alter ego, which he had once materialized due to his rage. This death of St. Jimmy is only figurative, however, as Jimmy does not actually kill himself but is reborn. Our main character becomes who he once was, the Jesus of Suburbia. After the death of St. Jimmy, Jesus of Suburbia has settled for a quote, normal life, leaving his alternate past. He tries to loosen his ties with his past so he no longer listens to anyone. He is settling for a routine job and spends the day reminiscing on the life he once had. Jesus began to call out for help, wanting out of where he is as he is being filled with more and more anxiety and is feeling the pressure of the direction his life has directed him to. What's Her Name leaving him has clearly left a hole in his life, and he is left reeling in response. Unsure of where to go or what to do, he constantly thinks about her even as life moves along. He is now sitting and thinking about where he has come in his life. The next chapter within Homecoming is a piece by Trey, in which his character Tunney has written a letter to Jesus explaining his life and how much he is enjoying it in the town where Jesus had left in the beginning of the album. One part representing that as Jesus is reading this letter, Jesus is reminded of the days when he was a non-conforming punk that wanted to change the world. At the end of this letter, Tunney has made quite clear he is pleased with his life, and he asks Jesus to stop bothering with complaints on how bad his had become. Afterwards, the final part of the song now begins, and in it, Jesus has finally decided to move back where he had originally come from. Hence the title of the song, Homecoming. He's gone back to Jingletown, and is known in the song as that. After all of his life, his rebellious youth, and now finding himself in a dead end where he was, he returns home. The letter from his old friend likely helping him, as he knows he has nothing left where he had went, so it's back to the old familiar he was once accustomed to. Once back home, Jesus is left with the thoughts of his old flame burning in his head. He struggles to remember her as time moves along, as he grows accustomed to normality. It's been so long he can't even remember her name. He wonders what had happened to her. All he has is the memories of her. The album ends with him still trying to forget her. Now with the album coming to a close, let's gather it all together as we go over some final thoughts of mine. Okay, so I feel that this should be rather obvious based off of me commenting over and over and over again that this album is so important, and that it should come as no surprise to you that I'm actually quite a fan of this album. It definitely has my natty seal of approval. It is certainly one of, if not the greatest complete work that Green Day has ever put out in their career. Sure, they have made other very important albums over their span, but none can really compare in the scale of American Idiot's popularity. It took the band as they were in a career low and catapulted them into the star status that we see them today. Without the album's success, we likely would not have gotten the level of work they have done since. They probably would not have done a cover with U2, we wouldn't have gotten 21 Guns, or any of the works after that. The success of the album led to the band to even create a musical based off of this album, and that's no small feat. Green Day began to sell out arenas the world over as their popularity took off, as well as this album. I know that I'm supposed to be giving my thoughts on the album as a whole, but we cannot forget to mention just how popular this album had become. But yes, to give my thoughts on the album as a whole, I of course enjoy it. I have mentioned that already, but I do very much appreciate its overarching story. The album's songs feel primarily like chapters unfolding through a vast story. I find that to be quite enjoyable, actually, and it is really feeling like it unfolds as time goes along. Many interesting points are brought up in it and really speak to the emotional depths the various band members had been through in their collective experiences, and also speaks to their ability to craft a story over many different songs. In the age of digital downloads, streaming services, etc., it is not likely we'll see another album quite like it get as big as American Idiot had. Albums are more of a collection of singles now, with some spares thrown in to get the album with an overarching story is not so common anymore. It was once a dominant force back in the 70s, but by the early 2000s it had all but vanished. The success of American Idiot would in fact inspire others to make their own story albums, where a story would be told through the course of an album. The next most successful one that comes to my mind is My Chemical Romance's Black Parade. MCR, in fact, said in an interview that they looked up to Green Day as a sort of old guard in their eyes. So that tells a lot about Green Day's influence, especially as they mention American Idiot themselves. Also, for all the talk there is about it being a political record, I wouldn't really say it is. The politics kind of right in the backseat through most of the album. They kind of just stay there to prop up the story as it is told, really, and as a motivating factor for the character. It is more of an emotional record about many personal experiences within a very politicized landscape. I do believe everyone should go and take a listen to this album. While not all the songs fit perfectly in its narrative, the vast majority do. Even if not fitting in the narrative, every song is great in its own way, and the production quality over the entire album is just so great that it should be listened to all the way through. The best way to listen to this album is that way, in my opinion. But I gotta say, this album is one that has very much grown on me as I have grown up more and more. I have gradually begun to understand more and more of what the album preaches in its story as time has went on, and I have grown up and matured along with it. It still has a lot to say about the American landscape of today, and that just goes to show how well this album was made. It has stood the test of time, and it hasn't exactly aged all too much, at least in my eyes. Do go and listen to this album if you so desire. If it is your first time in a while listening to it, perhaps you will even pick up on some new details you hadn't noticed before. Like with me, the album grew with me over time, getting better with each new listen over the years. It's a masterwork in the discography of Green Day, and if anyone hasn't listened to it so far, you should at least give it a try. Now on to my conclusion. There isn't much else I can really say about this album. So much of it is still relevant to this day, and even if some songs have aged, a vast majority are still great. I do feel everyone who is interested should check it out. Perhaps it could educate some and be enjoyable to others. I can only speak for myself, however, and for me, I certainly enjoyed this album, and it really did capture the zeitgeist at the time, and serves as quite a portrayal of the band members' various thoughts on how growing up in a post 9/11 world America would be like. Once more, if you're interested, please do check the album out, and you'll likely interpret things differently than me, and you'll likely find other things I didn't quite pick up on or that I missed. Do let me know what your own thoughts on the album was down below. But yes, I hope you have enjoyed. I wish you all well. I have been your host, Natty, and the time to sign out has come. So, take care and farewell.